All right, I'm at Leo. I just bought the 14-inch KDMaui Marlin. I was so impressed with Kane when I met him at AWSI. He gave me such a great interview. I was like, I got to try this thing out. And there's not a lot of wind right now, and the waves are pretty small, but hopefully we can try out the foil and see if it's fast, see if it glides more, see if we actually notice a difference. If I'm really ambitious, maybe I'll compare it to some other ones and try and do some speed testing, but mostly I just want to feel how it is, so we'll see. These are the tail wings I normally ride. I was on the 14-inch, but I moved down to the 13-inch, and I didn't really notice too much of a disadvantage, and it felt like it was a little bit less drag. The KDMaui is a little bit higher aspect. If you compare the Marlin to the 14-inch Shiv, it seems to be about a similar profile and thickness, and that's the neutral foot tail wing. If you compare it to the shank, it looks like maybe it's a little bit thicker, a little bit more lift than the shank for sure. And the Marlin also sort of trends downward as you go toward the tip. I think that's called anhedral, and I think that improves the turning of the foil. And then I put the foils on top of each other just so you can get a better comparison between the shapes. Now, of course, my Shiv has been through the ringer, and my 14-inch has been through the ringer, and it's been sanded down, so it's not a stock one I'm comparing it to. I tried to use the 1 degree red shim that comes with the unifoil system because the Vyper needs a lot of shim, and you can see that there's a little bit of a gap there just in the way that it meets the foil. So I tried sanding it down, and I was able to get a pretty decent meet up there, but I just decided, like, I didn't know if that was exact, so I went with the KDMaui shims, which come with the foil. Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap there now, but I actually think it's less draggy than the unifoil system, because the unifoil system, while very clever and easy to use, it's kind of bulky, and I've tried to sand it down before to make it less draggy. Let's go test this thing out, see if we can get on foil. It looks pretty bleak out there. And yeah, it was really bleak. There was a couple of people out. They were all on 7s except for Ryan, but she's smaller, and she was on a 5.5 with a 2,000 square centimeter foil. I had to drift out to the wind line, and then I'll show you exactly what it took for me to get up on my 6 and this Vyper 150. It was really hard to get on foil, but that wasn't because of putting on this tail wing. The tail wing has quite a bit of lift. That wasn't the problem. It was just there was no wind. Once I got up, I tried to do some gliding, even though there was no swell to glide on, but the foil didn't magically turn the Vyper into a gliding machine. It had good lift, and it was very low drag through the water, but it didn't really change that aspect of the foil. What it did change was the turning ability of the foil, which surprised me. I stayed up as long as I could. I tried to rip some turns, but there's a lot of seaweed out. I got enough seaweed onto my foil to where at some point I just couldn't even stay up anymore. I had to go down, and then I never got back up. I drifted downwind, and I had to walk in and walk back upwind. It wasn't a great session, but I did get a sense of what this tail wing could really be used for. So I returned to Leo the next day for another test run. Well, it's actually pretty windy today. I thought it was going to be another really light wind day. I actually even brought the 8 today. There's not that much swell and not really a lot of waves. So I think I'm going to rig this proto uni gave me to try, and it didn't go into production. I've never really liked it, but I think what would really help it is this tail. I think this KDMaui tail might actually make the foil work better. So I paired the 14 Marlin with this Unifoil 140 Proto. That's 95 wide, AR-10, and fairly flat race wing. And I was wrong. It was not windy. It was actually pretty light again. This is a wave I would not have been able to ride on my Vyper 150. And I was right. The 14 Marlin made this foil that I didn't really like into a really, really fun foil. It had the good glide that was so good with the AR-10 flat race wing, but it could still turn. Here's me putting that turning to the test around Clinton, one of the best wave riders out there. In fact, I think he's the best big wave rider out there. No one can carve up a wave with an 8-meter like him. And then I ran out of wind and I couldn't get back on foil at the end of the turn. After this, we were able to get on a party wave. It was a pretty good wave. I was trying to tell Clinton to get closer to me so we could film both of us. Boaz was downwind of us. He actually peeled off the wave. I think he was too far from the peak. Clinton was really in the good spot, just carving it up. I was sort of in the middle, just trying to film and riding this thing out. And once again, couldn't do this on my Vyper 150. Would not have been possible. After that, I did some tips out testing. Surprisingly, this was the easiest tips out of any foil. The filming's not great, but yeah, super easy with that race foil and the 14 Marlin. Then I had to throw a mandatory flocka. There was no wind, so I wasn't able to land it, but got to throw it. And after that, I did a little just pumping. This is not on a wave. This is just flat water pumping, throwing a shaka, feeling good. And then I think I hit some seaweed and exploded. All right, well, I'm back at the beach, hoping to go out. Wind's a little bit light, but I'm going to try and get a session in. And let's talk about the Marlin, the 14 Marlin. I really like this tail wing. It's got a really interesting turn-down design that really enables you to turn very well. It's also slippery through the water, has good glide, but I'd be lying if I said this turned my Vyper 150 into a gliding machine. It didn't do that. I was kind of thinking that's what it might do, but it really didn't. It felt okay on the Vyper, but the Vyper already turns really well. In fact, this design almost made it a little squirrely because it added some even better turnability. When I tried it on the Wingfoil Proto, which is like 95 centimeters wide and AR-10 and very thin, that foil I don't normally like to ride because it doesn't turn that well. It's not very surfy. You put this thing on there with the 1 degree shim, and all of a sudden that foil comes alive, and it's really fun. I took it out at Leo, and I was able to get onto a couple of waves. They weren't very good waves. They weren't waves I would be able to ride on my Vyper 150 at all. But with that proto and the higher aspect ratio, I was able to glide, and yet this tail made it actually pretty fun. I even tried a couple of freestyle moves. If you bought some high aspect foil, like maybe an old, one of those super high aspect Armstrongs, and then you decided it was like not that fun and you didn't really want to ride it that often, this tail saves you from having to buy a new foil. It kind of makes that foil usable again. I never ride that proto just because it's not really fun, but with this tail I can see myself riding it more. I'm going to try and take it out again today and ride some swell on it. If you have a Vyper or something like that, no, I don't think this tail is going to make that much of a difference for you. Is it better? Yeah, maybe. It might be a little bit more slippery, but it's not like significantly better. What I'm really interested in trying out now is the foil, the high aspect rear wing that Kane showed me at AWSI. I'll link a clip to that interview. It's a really good interview. He talks about tail wings and what they do and their purpose. But I would definitely be interested in trying that one out because it's really high aspect. And he said there's a huge difference even between the Marlin and that tail. Check these out. Kane is an awesome dude doing some really interesting stuff with his foils over at KT. Maybe instead of going out and buying a brand new foil, you can just spend a couple $100 on one of these and try it out. He's also got a bunch of other tails that you can try out on his website, KDMaui. Check it out. I got one more session in on the Marlin with the proto, and this was in very, very light wind. It took me 2 hours to get on foil. I was using an 8-meter wing, and I was on some really good waves, and I'll just leave you with this footage. I would have been turning and carving this up even more, but I knew if I fell, it would be the end of the session. Yeah, the Marlin really, really makes that foil so much more fun, especially in the surf.